In the early morning hours of July 20, 1971, a distress call was made to the Burlington, Vermont Police Department. A concerned woman reported the tragic murder of her roommate, Rita Curran. Upon returning home from work, she discovered Rita's lifeless body lying in a pool of her own blood on their shared bed. The scene was horrifying, indicating that an intruder had broken into their apartment and subjected Rita to a brutal attack involving physical assault, sexual assault, and strangulation. It was evident that Rita had fought fiercely against her assailant. The identity of Rita's killer remained a haunting mystery for both her family and the Burlington Police Department for many years, despite their exhaustive investigation and pursuit of numerous leads. However, after 52 long years, the perpetrator was finally identified. Rita Curran, born on June 21, 1947, in Brooklyn, Kings County, New York, was the beloved daughter of Thomas and Mary Curran. Described as a kind-hearted, generous, and beautiful individual, Rita was known for her gentle nature and her aversion to causing harm to others. At the age of 24, in the summer of 1971, she made the decision to move out of her parents' home for the first time and share an apartment on Brooks Avenue in Burlington, Vermont, with 3 other roommates who she had not yet formed a close bond with. Rita worked as a second-grade teacher at Milton Elementary School and was also pursuing graduate courses at the University of Vermont. During the summer break, she took on a job as a maid at a local motel. Tragically, just 2 weeks after leaving her family's house, Rita's life was brutally taken within the confines of her Burlington apartment. The police report indicated that she had been preparing for bed at the time of the attack, as she was found with curlers in her hair. The shocking murder of Rita Curran sent shockwaves of fear throughout the usually peaceful and welcoming city of Burlington. It was a time when many residents left their front doors unlocked, and this heinous crime shattered the sense of security within the community. It is possible that Rita Curran's apartment door was not locked at the time of her murder because there was no visible force used on the entrance door, as determined by the police investigation. During the investigation, the police collected evidence from the crime scene, including a single cigarette near Rita Curran's arm, which was believed to have been left by the killer to burn out. The police also interviewed Rita Curran's neighbors and followed up on hundreds of tips. Among the neighbors questioned were Williams and Michelle DeRuse, a newly wedded couple who lived 2 floors above Rita Curran at the time of her murder. They informed investigators that they had been together all night and had not heard or seen anything suspicious. The police had a list of 13 suspects, one of whom was Ted Bundy. It was discovered that the local motel where Rita Curran worked was located near Ted Bundy's birthplace, the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers. The murder and crime scene of Rita Curran bore similarities to Ted Bundy's modus operandi, leading retired FBI agent John Bassett to propose him as a suspect. In an attempt to find closure and determine if Ted Bundy was truly responsible for Rita Curran's murder, Mary Campbell Curran, Rita's sister, wrote a letter to Florida's death row where Ted Bundy was incarcerated. The FBI responded by informing her that Ted Bundy had refused to confirm or deny his involvement in Curran's death, and there was no concrete evidence placing him in Burlington on the date of the murder. However, Detective Robert B. Keppel interviewed Ted Bundy, who later admitted to him that he had murdered a young woman in Burlington in 1971 while he was there gathering information about his birth. But on January 22, 1989, the night before his execution, Ted Bundy denied any involvement in Rita Curran's case to FBI Special Agent William Hackmeyer. With all leads exhausted and lacking advanced DNA technology to identify a suspect, the case remained unsolved for over 4 decades. According to Acting Police Chief John Murad of Burlington, the department has consistently pursued justice for Rita Curran's family. In 2014, The Burlington Police Department sent all the evidence from the crime scene, including the cigarette, to a forensic lab in New York City for DNA testing. Although the tests generated a DNA profile from the cigarette, it did not match any DNA in the databases maintained by law enforcement agencies nationwide. This suggested that the individual who left their DNA on the cigarette had likely never had their genetic material entered into the database, possibly due to a lack of felony convictions. Furthermore, the DNA testing did not match the known DNA of any of the 13 main suspects identified by the police. However, in 2019, Detective Lieutenant James Trebe decided to take a new approach to the case. Instead of assigning a single detective to work on the case, as was the usual department strategy, Lieutenant Trebe assembled a new team of detectives and expert technicians to review and discuss the Rita Curran case. This team treated the case as if it had just occurred, and they began retesting the evidence, including sending the cigarette for DNA analysis once again. This time, they utilized genetic genealogy, a process that utilizes DNA databases for genealogical research to identify potential family members of the individual whose DNA does not match any existing profiles. Following the DNA analysis, the genetic genealogy expert determined that the DNA on the cigarette had strong connections to relatives of William DeRose, a man who resided 2 floors above Rita Curran's apartment in 1971. William DeRose had been questioned by detectives alongside his wife and claimed to have been at home during the time of the murder. Subsequently, the investigators located a living half-brother of William DeRose who willingly provided a DNA sample. After conducting the test, it was ultimately determined that the DNA on the cigarette belonged to William DeRose. In 2022, additional evidence found at the crime scene, including Rita Curran's torn housecoat, was sent to a crime lab in Florida. At this lab, they utilized new DNA extraction techniques to further analyze the evidence. Prior to this, the detectives had sent the genetic evidence from the cigarette to a genealogy company. Their aim was to explore a larger DNA database that could potentially assist in identifying the killer. Remarkably, the scientist and genealogy expert were able to swiftly match the DNA from the cigarette to William DeRose. This breakthrough was achieved through extensive research of genealogical and public records. Furthermore, the DNA found on Rita Curran's ripped housecoat was also a match to the DNA on the cigarette butt. Subsequently, the investigators made a startling discovery. They learned that William DeRose had passed away at the age of 46 in 1986 due to a drug overdose at a San Francisco hotel. Shortly after Rita Curran's murder, he and his wife had left Vermont and eventually divorced. During an interview with the police, William DeRose's ex-wife, Michelle, revealed that she had lied in 1971 about her husband's whereabouts on the night of the incident. Michelle, who had relocated to Eugene, Oregon, and changed her name, explained that William DeRose had engaged in an argument with her on the evening of July 19, 1971. In an attempt to cool off, he had gone for a walk. He returned later that night and instructed Michelle to inform the investigating officers that he had never left their apartment. He warned her that his previous criminal record might unfairly make him a suspect in Rita Curran's death. Detective Thomas Chennett, who conducted the interview with Michelle, expressed his skepticism regarding her knowledge of William DeRose being the killer. He believed that she was protecting him due to their recent marriage and their evident love for each other, as well as his criminal history. Following their divorce, William DeRose relocated to Thailand and became a monk. However, he returned to San Francisco, United States in 1974, where he met his second wife, Sarah Hepting. During an interview with the Burlington police, Sarah Hepting disclosed that William DeRose had a tendency for sudden outbursts of violence. She stated that there were 2 occasions where he had displayed extreme violence towards her. One of these instances occurred while they were conversing with a female friend, when he unexpectedly grabbed a pocket knife and stabbed the woman in her abdomen without any apparent reason. Although he was arrested, the woman chose not to press charges. Later, DeRose confessed to Hepting that he had mistakenly believed he had stabbed her. Hepting mentioned that the second incident of DeRose violence took place during a dinner, when he suddenly began to strangle her for no apparent reason. This was the final straw for Hepting, leading her to leave him. Following the resolution of Rita Curran's case, her unfortunate parents passed away without ever knowing who had taken their daughter's life. However, her remaining family and friends remembered her and found solace in the closure the case provided. Jim Robar, a former second-grade student of Rita Curran, fondly recalled her as a kind and beautiful person. He shared a memory of a play they performed together, where he played a dancing clown holding a teddy bear. Rita had gifted him the teddy bear, which he still cherishes, although he currently cannot locate it. Mary Curran Campbell, Rita's sister, expressed the sadness that 2 generations of their family have grown up without knowing her. Tom Curran, Rita's brother, focused more on the experiences their parents and Rita endured, rather than dwelling on the perpetrator. He praised to his parents and Rita for their peace. In closing the case, Lieutenant Trebe confidently stated that William DeRose was responsible for the aggravated murder of Rita Curran. However, due to his death from a drug overdose in a hotel room, he will not be held accountable for his actions. Nevertheless, the case will be officially closed. On January 18, 1981, at approximately 6:30 a.m. in Camarillo, California, located about 50 miles from Los Angeles, 2 newspaper delivery boys made a chilling discovery. They stumbled upon the lifeless body of Rachel Zendejas, a 20-year-old Oxnard college student and a single mother of 2. Rachel had recently gone through a divorce and resided in an apartment complex on Mobile Avenue, just across the street from where her tragic fate awaited her. Sharing the apartment with her brother and 2 daughters, Rachel's life was abruptly cut short in the carport of the complex. Law enforcement swiftly arrived at the crime scene, collecting crucial evidence that would aid in their investigation. As detectives delved deeper into the case, they uncovered that Rachel had ventured out the evening prior to her murder in search of babysitters to care for her young girls. Returning home the following morning after dropping off the babysitters, Rachel was ambushed by her assailant as she exited her vehicle. The circumstances surrounding her murder were both heart-wrenching and perplexing. For years, the police tirelessly pursued leads and explored every possible avenue in their quest for justice. However, despite their relentless efforts, the case eventually grew cold as all leads were exhausted. The tragic murder of Rachel Zendejas remained unsolved, leaving her family and the community in a state of despair. Yet, just before the year's end, in the early hours of December 12, 1981, a neighbor's call to the police would once again ignite hope. The neighbor reported a fire outbreak at an apartment in Oxnard, breathing new life into the investigation. Upon receiving the emergency call, the Oxnard Fire Department swiftly responded to the location and promptly extinguished the raging fire. Subsequently, during their investigation, they made a grim discovery. The lifeless body of Lisa Gondek, a 21-year-old woman, was found unclothed in the apartment's bathtub. It was evident that she had been subjected to a heinous crime, as her assailant had not only raped and strangled her, but also set the apartment ablaze. Shockingly, despite the audible screams heard by her neighbors, they failed to alert emergency services until the smell of smoke permeated the air. Lisa Gondek, a retail worker residing in Oxnard, had attended a club at the Port Huenham Naval Base on the night of December 11, 1981. Following her time at the disco with friends, she was dropped off at her home around 1:30 a.m. the next day. Tragically, she was discovered lifeless in her bathtub, and the identity of her killer remained unknown for several decades. Lisa Gondek had initially traveled from Connecticut to Oxnard for a planned 2-week visit to a friend in the U.S. Navy. However, she ultimately made the decision to relocate to Oxnard months before her untimely demise. Prior to her death, she had made a heartfelt promise to her loved ones, expressing her intention to spend Christmas with them, stating, "Mom, I'll be home for Christmas." Lisa Gondek relocated to Oxnard and moved in with a childhood best friend. She secured a job at a teen clothing store in the Esplanade shopping center. Despite being new to the area, she quickly formed new friendships. According to her roommate, Lisa was not only kind-hearted, but also possessed inner and outer beauty. Her roommate stated, "If Lisa had $1, she would willingly share it with you." The investigations into Rachel Zandijas and Lisa Gondek's cases were initially conducted separately. However, in 2002, the suspect's DNA found at Rachel Zandijas' crime scene was submitted to the FBI's combined DNA index system. A search was conducted in the criminal database for felons, but unfortunately, it did not yield any results. Nevertheless, in 2004, the investigators working on Lisa Gondek's case utilized DNA testing and informed the Ventura County Sheriff's Office that both Rachel Zandijas and Lisa Gondek's homicides were linked to a single suspect. Unfortunately, the DNA did not provide any identifiable information about the suspect, and the case went cold once again. Another intriguing connection was established between both women as they had visited a nightclub called Huntington in the hours leading up to their deaths. This nightclub, which is now closed, was a popular spot located across from the Esplanade Mall. In December 2019, the Cold Case Unit of Ventura County took charge of the investigations once again. They employed the use of genetic genealogy, an advanced form of DNA testing, to identify potential relatives of the suspects. This approach yielded new leads, and subsequent DNA testing confirmed that Tony Garcia was the prime suspect in both homicides. Surprisingly, Tony Garcia had been living in Oxnard all along, right under the noses of the detectives, for over 4 decades. Born in Roswell, New Mexico, he had served in the U.S. Navy and was stationed at Point Magoo near Oxnard. Although Tony Garcia was discharged from service in 1980, he chose to remain in Oxnard, where he pursued his passion for karate and became a dedicated student and instructor for many years. During the time of his arrest, Tony Garcia was employed as a carpenter. It remains uncertain whether he had any prior acquaintance with his victims. Tony Garcia faced charges of 2 counts of murder, along with additional allegations of committing murder while involved in a rape and committing murder while involved in a kidnapping. Upon his initial court appearance, he was instructed to be detained without bail. Following Tony Garcia's apprehension, Roy Rodriguez, the brother of Rachel Zandijas, expressed, "I am determined to bring closure to Rachel's case and fulfill my purpose."
A hiker found human remains belonging to a male near Natural Bridges State Park in Santa Cruz County at 4:30 a.m. on October 6, 1982. Investigators determined that the unknown man's life had been taken by someone. For 41 years, the case remained cold until an important partnership with emerging forensic-grade genome sequencing was done by Othram Labs. Othram is the first private laboratory in North America that was purpose-built to generate human ID from forensic evidence and crime scene evidence. They are working on cases like this one all across North America and having a great deal of success. DNA extract that was derived from the victim's bones was sent to Othram from the California Department of Justice. Othram did what is called a suitability analysis on it and measured how much DNA is truly there. Othram Labs has the capability to look at hundreds of thousands of DNA markers, making it easier to find more distant relatives and reverse engineer back to the direct family. In this case, it was genealogy that pointed towards a family of the victim. The FBI then got involved, and they were able to use some fingerprinting once they had an idea of who it may be, to confirm that identity. Law enforcement was able to take that important link and finally give a name to the body, known for so long to investigators as John Doe. In October 2023, it was announced to the public that the human remains belonged to 28-year-old Rodney Allen Rumsey. Rodney was born on May 25, 1954. He lived in Sacramento, California. Michael Vaughan, the director of account management at Othram Lab, said this started out as an unidentified human remains case, and now they have an entirely new case that they are investigating. The community is impacted, the detectives are impacted, decades of family members, and it feels really good, and we celebrated it, and then it is on to the next one. Rodney's left forearm had a red rose with 3 leaves on it, and a tattoo of a skull on his left forearm. The skull had black braids, 3 red-tipped feathers jutting out from the head, and red around the eye sockets. Lieutenant Karina Cesena, a spokeswoman for the Santa Cruz Police Departments, said investigators still have much work to do and will try to reach out to Rumsey's family. Anyone with information about this case may call the Santa Cruz Police Department's investigation unit at 8314205820 or the department's tip line at 83142-0595. Patricia Chupko Bender's only child, Susan Robin Bender, was born in Modesto, California, on November 27, 1970. Susan, who was 15 at the time, left her family's house on April 25, 1986, to spend the weekend with friends in Carmel by the sea. To get to the Greyhound bus station at 10th and G Street, she walked alone. Susan ran into friends while she was waiting for the bus. She informed them of her coastal excursion and her intention to return in a few days. Susan used the payphone at the depot to make a call after their talk. After 10 minutes, a full-size 1977 Ford van with an olive green exterior arrived. Susan entered the car. Susan was last observed at this location. In the 1980s, it was not unheard of for a 15-year-old to have so much freedom. Susan's mother, Patricia Bender, assumed her daughter had arrived in Carmel safely and was enjoying herself with her friends. Susan's mother started to worry when she didn't make the usual phone call home. On May 1st, 1986, she reported her daughter missing. The detectives quickly deduced that Susan had suffered a terrible fate. We have certain evidence to indicate foul play was involved in Susan Bender's disappearance, a detective told the local newspaper. The same newspaper was informed by Susan's mother that although Susan had fled home twice previously, she had always returned rather quickly. Patricia said, before she vanished, things had been going well between us for a few months. There was no sign that she was planning to run away. She also mentioned that a male person of interest who was not identified had been discovered in possession of Susan's phone book, clothing, and diary. Patricia went on to say, "I fear she was attacked by a man who was questioned by the police, but never taken into custody. Despite having a lot of circumstantial evidence against him, they chose not to arrest him. Susan was never thought to have gone missing voluntarily by the police." In 1987, Detective Richard Ridenour, who was assigned to the case until his retirement in 2000, told a newspaper that he believed Susan was probably dead. According to an interview with Susan's mother from 1999, the police said there is little they can do without a body. That same year, Detective Ridenour said, "Susan Bender just fell off the face of the earth." The strangest thing about this case is that no information about her has surfaced in all these years, and no one has ever come forward to tell what happened to her. In 1999, 2 childhood friends from Linden, California, Lauren Herzog and Wesley Shermantine, also targeted young women in and around the nearby Stockton area. There was conjecture that Susan could have been one of their victims. Many of their victims remain unidentified. Although Susan disappeared while the men were occupied with their evil deeds, it is possible that the men had anything to do with her kidnapping, even though the authorities did not know. Susan's disappearance was consistent with their victim-focused strategy. However, Susan's case had never been connected to Herzog's or Shermantine's crimes, despite years of investigation. The 1980 and 1990 saw the two evil friends go on a rampage. They may have killed over 15 people, including several women. Meanwhile, Susan's case went unresolved for almost 40 years. Investigators had conversations with friends and family who had battled to preserve Susan's story. In 2021, Susan's friend, Sandy Silveria, made the following comment: "Where is she? What was her fate? It is necessary to hold whoever did this accountable." The Modesto Police Department declared in October 2021 that they had reopened the case in an effort to find the long-lost teenager. In reviewing this case, we identified potential areas of opportunity which may assist in moving this case forward, the department stated in a statement. This encompasses the application of technological innovations. We also think that, given the circumstances of the crime, there might be previously unidentified people who could know important details about Susan's disappearance. Investigators looking into cold cases in Modesto hope that in the years since Susan vanished, more witnesses would feel inclined to come forward. In a statement released in 2022, the police department stated, "It's crucial to keep in mind that Susan was a young child living with a family. Regretfully, the family has not received justice or closure for 36 years. As an organization, it is our responsibility to help achieve some measure of closure while ultimately pursuing justice." Finally, on Thursday, August 17, 2023, Raymond Lewis Stafford was declared arrested by the Modesto Police Department. Lewis, who is now age 76, was arrested in Wills Point, 50 miles east of Dallas, where he had been residing for about 5 years on August 15, 2023. For decades, Stafford seemed to be living in plain sight. On August 10, detectives obtained an arrest warrant. However, it wasn't until Tuesday that the Van Zandt County Sheriff's Department in Texas arrived at his residence and took him into custody. He was charged with killing Susan after he was apprehended without trouble and checked into the Van Zandt County Jail. More information regarding what Modesto police believe happened to Susan was withheld. Raymond Lewis is now in detention in Texas while awaiting extradition to California. It's unclear exactly how the detective narrowed in on him as a potential suspect. The Stanislaus County District Attorney's Office is receiving different unanswered questions from Modesto police, who claim they have no further information to share. The Modesto Police Department and the Stanislaus County District Attorney were contacted by newspapers and local radio stations to find out what happened before the suspect was taken into custody, but they did not receive a response. There was no information made public regarding Susan's exact cause of death, the possibility of finding her body, or the new evidence that led to Raymond Lewis charges. The Stanislaus County District Attorney's Office, the California Department of Justice, and several Texas authorities were thanked by Modesto police in a press release for their assistance during the protracted and difficult investigation. It stated that the collaborative efforts of these agencies have been instrumental in bringing closure to Susan Robin Bender's case. Detectives had a suspect almost immediately after they developed a suspicion of foul play. According to court documents filed in Stanislaus County, a month after Susan disappeared, Lewis was taken into custody on suspicion of a separate burglary, and investigators at the time tracked him down using the green van. At that time, his name had not been made public. During their investigation, they discovered that Raymond Stafford Lewis had collaborated briefly with Patricia Bender, Susan's mother. Patricia said at the time that she thought Lewis might have become close to her daughter after calling their house phone. According to court records, Patricia briefly worked for Stafford Lewis at his security company in 1985. They added that she acknowledged dating Lewis a couple of times. Susan knew Lewis well. Susan had been spotted getting into his rental van at the bus stop. Her friend, who was present at the bus station on the day she vanished, claims that she jumped into his van without hesitation. According to a former resident of Raymond Stafford's house in the 1980s, Stafford admitted to killing a woman by strangling her with a wire or cord and burying her close to the Big Oak Flat Yosemite entrance. According to court records that were obtained, he claimed to have driven to a campground close to Yosemite National Park's Big Oak Flat entrance and dug the grave. In the months following Susan's disappearance, 38-year-old Raymond Stafford filed to run for Modesto City Council. When the local newspaper inquired about his criminal history, he responded in July 1985 that it was just the consequence of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. His arrest records indicated that he was wearing a badge identifying him as a private investigator and running an unlicensed private investigation company. According to Stafford, the main focus of his campaign was enacting laws that would shield kids from predators. He continued, "We do not spend any time getting the people who are harassing our children." Not surprisingly, he was not elected. Stafford admitted to filing a false police report and was found guilty of setting a business on fire 5 months later, in December 1986. According to reports, he staged a kidnapping to get out of going to court. He reappeared on law enforcement's radar in 1994. For abusing a 13-year-old girl in California, he was listed as an offender under the alias Greg Tunningley on the offender registry. Stafford was revealed to be the man in new court documents. Patricia Bender disclosed that she had always believed Stafford was the reason for her daughter's disappearance, having learned the two had maintained a secret relationship. "I have known from the beginning, when my daughter came up missing," Patricia stated. "I've been aware that he was the one behind it. I told the investigators so, but they ignored me." Patricia continued saying that for the previous 37 years, the thought had been a part of her. "Honestly, it felt like I was lost," she went on. "It appeared as though I were a dead woman walking. Hearing others talk about their grandchildren and children hurts." Patricia claimed that her motivation came from her 15-year-old daughter's memories. She recalled Susan's gregarious nature. "She was a comic. She was just a typical adolescent trying to find her place," Patricia said. Patricia Bender never gave up, but up until this point, her search for her daughter had been excruciating. She mentioned having to rely on her faith. She said, "I am appreciative. I'm happy that the system has at last made the decision to act and stop leaving me in the dark." In order to bid Susan farewell, which they have always believed she deserves, those closest to her hope to find out where she is. Her mother now states in the final act that forgiveness for Stafford is the one thing she has never struggled with. "Although it may seem strange to say, I have forgiven him for the harm he caused to my daughter. I truly have, since I don't want to live my entire life carrying that burden." Patricia claimed that a heavy cloud had been lifted from her shoulders by this arrest. "At this point, I am not excited about how the trial will proceed. I only want to locate Susan's body. My message is a simple one," she said in a closing remark. "Pay attention to your children now.